So we're going to spend a few weeks talking about Joseph of the Old Testament, not Joseph, Jesus' earthly father. Joseph is quite an interesting character, and he comes from quite an interesting family. And that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time this morning, is a little bit of an introduction to him. But you can't really talk about Joseph unless you go back a few generations and talk about his family line as well. So let's just jump in and get a quick introduction to Joseph, and then we'll do the rewind. But start on Genesis 37, the first 4 verses. If you have a paper Bible, that's going to be the best for this morning. There's a few in the pews in front of you, because we're going to do like a real kind of quick flip through a large chunk of the book of Genesis, and it's going to be kind of hard to keep that going like just by scrolling on the phone. So if you've got a paper Bible, great. If not, you'll have to keep up. But Genesis 37, 1 through 4. Someone read that for us. Thank you. Pretend for a minute you know absolutely nothing about the story of Joseph. So just whatever you think you know, erase it for a minute. I want to just focus on these 4 verses only. Okay? Based on these 4 verses, what is life like on the family farm? What jumps out of these from these 4 verses? Sibling rivalry. Tell me more.
There's lots of favoritism.
Okay, we got some favoritism happening here. It says that Jacob loved Joseph more than all his children. We'll find out how many children he has in a little bit. He's got a lot. But we got some favoritism happening. What else? There's so much in these 4 verses. It's crazy. Okay, so Jacob has multiple wives, multiple children from multiple wives, but the ones mentioned are not Joseph's mother. Great.
We know that at least Joseph worked the flocks, but we don't know if anybody else does.
Okay, so we got an agricultural family. Joseph is out working. It did say he was feeding the flock with his brothers. So I'm assuming or taking that to be like they're all out there working together. He is a snitch. Yes, he's a tattletale. What's that all about? Oh man, so like you talk about sibling rivalry, it's not only is like the father showing favoritism to this one, but then this one, is he like the spy for his dad because they got this special thing going and he's like snitching on his brothers hate him. There's another reason the brothers hate him. What else happened? What was another one of the ways that Jacob showed his favoritism? Yeah, the coat. So they're a farming family. This coat would have not just been like the normal, like, let me go put on my farmer's jacket and go get work done. This was more like a king's robe. And so here's Joseph out like, I'm going to go feed the sheep in my king's robe, while the brothers are all just wearing, whatever dirty clothes they would normally wear to go feed the sheep. Okay?
It makes me wonder if Joseph is clueless to how his brothers really feel about him.
I'm so glad you picked up on this. Joseph is immature. I mean, he's 17. He's young. He's a baby. Especially compared to the others. We don't have context here, at least in these first 4 verses, of how old or how much older his older brothers are. But Joseph is clueless. Yeah. I kind of wonder the favoritism. Did Joseph like that? Did he like being in that spotlight? Did he hate it because it made his brothers hate him? Like, we don't really know what's going on in Joseph's mind at this point. We just see there's this very blatant, very visual favoritism that happens. All right, so I think you guys have hit all the ones that I was thinking of. So we have Jacob, also known as Israel. He's mentioned by name in here twice, 2 different names. Multiple children from multiple wives. This was very common in the Old Testament. Doesn't mean that God agreed with it. That's not how God established marriage. But you see lots of multiple wives happening in the Old Testament. Doesn't mean it's right. We see Joseph being born to Jacob in his old age. I read this and think almost more like, would Jacob almost be more like a grandfather figure to Joseph than an actual father figure? And let's face it, grandfathers are way more fun, right? Yeah.
Depending on how old you are.
Exactly.
And their birth order.
Exactly. So we see that come into life here with that line of Joseph was born to Jacob in his old age. I think that's a huge clue for us. We see the favoritism because Jacob loved Joseph more than his other children, made him the special tunic. And it was so, again, blatantly obvious that the brothers hated him because their father loved him so much more than them. And then, Joseph has this really rocky relationship with his brothers. He ends up tattling on them. They hate him because of the coat. I mean, he's just walking around in this coat, and they're all just like, so mad at him because of this favoritism. Like, life's a little crazy on the family farm, just based on these 4 verses. So again, what we don't know, questions that still stand out in my mind, did Joseph enjoy this treatment? We don't know. How did Joseph handle the hatred from his brothers? Did it tear him up? Did he not care? He's 17, he's immature. We don't know what's going on in his head. None of this seems to be, at this point at least, Joseph's fault. He's kind of like the victim of circumstance because of the way his father is treating him. It's causing all this other stuff to happen. And he's like, I can't control this. I'm 17 years old. I'm the baby, one of the babies. Interesting situation based on just these 4 verses. But we can't go forward in Joseph's life until we first go backwards. There's so much more history that we have to understand that even brings us to these 4 verses. So we're going to do a flyby in the book of Genesis, and we're going to go all the way back to Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to meet Abraham, because Abraham is Joseph's great-grandfather. Genesis 12, again, we're going to do a real quick survey, so kind of scan the headlines and the subheadings here, and let's talk about the stuff that stands out. Someone read Genesis 12, just verses 2 and 3, please. That was great.
In stereo.
It wasn't stereo. Go for it. Just 2 and 3, yes, please.
I'll make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you.
Awesome. So this is God's initial promise to Abram at the time, is what his name was, that I'm going to make you great. So this happens in Genesis chapter 12. If you kind of flip through, we're going to see some headlines, and this promise gets reiterated from God to Abram multiple times between chapters 12 and chapter 16. And this covers about an 11-year period between these chapters, 12 to 16, 11 years. So he keeps getting this promise, but there's only one problem. Abraham and his wife Sarah, they ain't got no kids. So how is God going to make Abraham this great nation when Abraham doesn't have any children? So one thing that you may notice when you skip through the headlines in chapters 12 through 16, twice Abraham and Sarah are traveling, and they get to a place and they say, hey, let's lie and tell people that you're my sister. Because if we tell them that you're my wife, you're kind of good looking, they're probably going to kill me so they can have you. So So let's play along with this. Twice this happens. This is going to be important because we're going to see it come back again.
But was it a lie or just a half-truth? Because weren't they related?
They were like distant, like half brother, sister. There you go. Here's the way I see it. God has made multiple promises at this point to Abram that I am going to do this thing for you. And I love that we look all throughout Scripture and we talk about men of great faith, and Abraham is near like the very, very top of that list. But look at these flaws, right? He still, do what? Right. He still has this like doubt maybe in the back of his mind where like, I know God promised me this, but man, like I got to protect my wife.
Well, I have to have my plan B because I don't necessarily know what your plan is.
Yeah. So I just find it interesting. Don't you think God's promise would have given Abraham the confidence to tell the full truth and not just the half truth? Like, I think that's an interesting thing. And again, I wanted to pull it out because we're going to come back to it. So we get to Genesis 16 now. And this is where Sarah's like, I got it. It's been 11 years. We still don't have any kids. I've got it. Abraham, I want you to sleep with my maidservant and we'll have a baby that way. It's a perfect plan. And Abraham's like, yeah, let's do it. So this happens. The maidservant's name is Hagar. Hagar, of course, gives birth to a son named Ishmael. All right, so here we go. Now, again, you read through Genesis 16, the fights that this caused between Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and Hagar, Sarah and Hagar. The family drama is off to a real strong start already because of this situation. Fast forward again, there's some more promises made, more fighting in the family, but we finally get to Genesis 21. This is now 14 years later after the 11 years. So 25 years after God goes to Abram and says, I'm going to make you great. 25 years later, God says, okay, I'll open up Sarah's womb now and you're going to give birth to your own son. And they named him Isaac. What does the name Isaac mean? Do you know this? It means laughter. Because not only did Sarah laugh when God made this promise, Abraham had laughed as well. So both of them laughed when God said, okay, you're both old now. You're 100 years old or 99 years old, and you're going to have a baby. And they're both like, ha, 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 ha. So they named the kid Isaac. So now we've got Abraham and Sarah with Isaac, Abraham and Hagar with Ishmael. So we've got Ishmael and Isaac, half-brothers. And they're growing up together. Ishmael is 14 years older than Isaac. Like, again, I want to put this whole story together for us. They grow up together. At some point, Ishmael starts teasing Isaac. And Sarah's like, oh, no, you're not going to tease my kid. So she's like, hey, Abraham, I've got another idea. Get rid of him. And Abraham's like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. So he says, hey, Hagar and Ishmael, here's a jug of water. Goodbye. And he just excommunicates them, kicks them out of the family, and sends them out into the wilderness.
It's really weird in that whole thing because, God agrees.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then we have things of God dealing with Ishmael.
There's a whole other Ishmael line. Yeah, we're not...
Stuff there, what God said well, it's like this surprising.
Yeah. It's such an adventure to read these chapters. If you've not actually sat down and read them and connected all these dots and put this family line together, man, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. We get to Genesis 22, and God says, hey, Abraham, remember that son that I promised you, Isaac? He's like a young man now. I want you to kill him. And Abraham's like, all right, let's do it. And so they go through with it. They get up on the mountain right before Abraham. He's got the knife in the air, and God calls out and says, "Stop! Now I know. Now I know you are my faithful servant, and I'm going to bless you, and you'll be the father of many nations." So that gets us up to Genesis 22. I want you to put yourself in Isaac's shoes. for a moment. And because we talked about Abraham, now we're going to shift the generation down to Isaac, because Isaac now has, well, he's older now, but he's got a half-brother who's 14 years older. You don't know where he is. You don't know if he's alive or dead. You don't know if you like him, if you don't like him. I mean, they were fighting a bunch as kids, which is why Sarah had him sent away. He's exiled from the family. Somewhere out there, you've got a half-brother you know nothing about now at this point. So there's one thing. Your dad just tried to kill you. That's got to leave a mark, right? And then you get to Genesis chapter 23. Isaac is 28 years old, and his mom Sarah dies. Like, man, this is heavy. This is really heavy for this young man, 23 years old, and this is the life that he's lived thus far. That's pretty incredible. If you think about anybody in the Old Testament who would have needed some kind of therapy, like Isaac's a great candidate just because of what he's seen in his 23 short years already. He needs, it's amazing what he's gone through. So let's keep going with Isaac now and Isaac's story, because Isaac is Joseph's grandfather. We're all bringing this back to Joseph, so keep Joseph as the anchor point. Isaac now, we'll talk about, is Joseph's grandfather. So we get to Genesis chapter 24. Abraham's old. He's a widower because Sarah had just passed. He's very wealthy at this point. I mean, he's got anything and everything that he needs. And he says, I want my son Isaac to get married. I want to find a bride for Isaac. But he's like, but you can't marry any of the women that are around here. You got to go back to my homeland and get a relative. And so he sends a servant back. You can read through the story in Genesis 24, but this is where the servant is like approaching Abraham's hometown, and he's praying to God, and he says, God, show me the woman. Show me the woman. She's going to come out, she's going to offer me a drink, and she's also going to drink or give a drink to my camels. That's going to be the one, God, make it so. And that's exactly what happens. He gets to the town. Rebekah comes out to the well. She draws water for Abraham's servant. She draws water to give the camels a drink as well. And he's like, hey, you're the one. He goes, meets the family, and like takes her back.
Which, and to put some context into that as well, wells back then weren't buckets that you put on a spindle and they go down and then they come back up. Wells were literal holes in the ground, and they still exist there, you can see them, that literally had stairs cut into the sides. It was just giant holes that went down like a funnel, and there were stairs, and they literally had to walk down in a spiral to get to the bottom.
And then come back up. Yeah.
Correct. So in order to feed that camel, that woman not only had to go down and get water for him, but had to go back down and bring water back up for the camel. So this is not just, here, I'll dump my bucket and bring it back up. This is just contextual.
There's effort.
This is intense.
Yeah.
Like, intense to feed, to water these camels.
The city is not that heavy. It's like Kansas.
Tell me more.
The miles that the guy has to go.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's a journey. Yeah, it's a journey. So this is Rebekah. We meet her. They get married. Isaac's 40. Remember, he was 23 when his mom passes, so now 17 years later, we have the Rebekah situation. They get married. This is in Genesis 25, verse 20, is when it says they get married. So here's the thing, though. Just like Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah didn't have kids for a very, very long time. It takes them quite a while. Genesis 25, verse 21. Oops, I turned the page too soon. Verse 21, it says, Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And then the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So it's quite a while before they actually have these kids. And we find out later that Isaac is 60 when they're born. So he's 23 when his mom dies. 17 years later, at 40, he gets married to Rebekah. 20 years until they have kids. And just think contextually. in the Bible times, people got married young and had kids young. It was survival. It was, we need hands to work the farm so that we have food to eat and shelter and the things that we need. So to go 20 years with no kids, that's scary in this context. That's scary in this point in time. So 60 years old, Isaac and Rebekah have children, but it wasn't just a son, it was twins. In 25 verse 22, we read that the children struggled together within her. And she said, if everything's well, then why am I like this? She went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other. And the older will serve the younger. So countercultural. The older son of a family was the next patriarch of the family. He would get the most inheritance. Whatever else was left was divided among the other siblings, the other children. So this whole idea that the younger twin would serve the older twin was completely backwards, because the firstborn got everything back then. So this is, again, the story just continues to shape up here. Esau was born first of these 2 twins. And I love this. The Bible says he was a red, hairy baby. So you got Esau, red, hairy dude, born first. And then as Jacob is coming out, he is grabbing his older brother's heel. Fascinating. There's just something about that story. And it doesn't say anything about Jacob being red and hairy, so we'll just assume Jacob's just like regular dude compared to red, hairy Esau.
Well, later in the story, he comes out that he's not as hairy.
Right. We find that out later. Genesis 25. Somebody read 27 through 28 for us.
And the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of fear. But Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he owned the game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Ding dang. Here we are again. Not only did Abraham choose between 2 sons, we now have Isaac choosing between 2 sons. You see this family favoritism, this drama is happening all over again. So just like his father Abraham, Isaac is torn.
Not only that, Rebekah had a favorite.
Yeah.
It's not just the father, it's the mother.
Yeah, we got a mama's boy and a daddy's boy here. Now, we don't know exactly how much this favoritism was displayed to Esau and Jacob. Like, we see it very clear in Joseph's story, where it's like his father loved him the most and he made him this coat. Like, we see all these kind of clear examples. Here, we don't really see as much. And we don't know how much, again, like thinking of the mental state of this family, how much did it affect the boys? What did Esau think that his mother loved Jacob more? What did Jacob think that his father loved Esau more? This favoritism, again, is like pulling at the heartstrings of everyone. We get a little bit of a glimpse of it in Genesis 25, 29 through 34. Someone read this part for us. This is another popular or famous story of this whole group. 29 through 34.
Once when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I'm about to die, and of what use is a birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. And then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went on his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
So the birthright is what I was just mentioning a minute ago. The right of the firstborn son, the inheritance, the patriarchism. That's not a word. But you know what I mean. And so I look at this and go, is this a result of the parental favoritism? That Jacob is like, I'll show dad. I'll get the birthright, and then I'll be his favorite son. Then he'll love me more than he loves Esau. This is Caleb commentary. I'm not saying that that's exactly what's happening. I'm just trying to understand like the scene and what's going on in this family. Yeah. So we don't see that like explicitly. We see in a little bit how Rebekah's going to influence Jacob in a not so great way. Does she have that influence here? We don't know. But either way, there's this battle happening inside the home between these brothers.
Well, but it also makes you wonder about Esau and how well educated he was on a birthright. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like on his correct. Like did that young man understand the power of what the birthright is, the power of the firstborn, the power
Yeah, I'm
of
sure he
what
did.
his lineage was to be, for him to be like, I don't care, give it to me, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it says something about where was the if Jacob was being way too educated on things, what was Esau getting?
Exactly.
out of it? 'Cause
Yeah.
For you to be that flippant about giving you that bowl of stew, like that's dumb. That's just dumb.
Yeah, it's
So
just crazy.
Well, Jacob was hanging out with his mom, getting educated, while Esau was out hunting.
mom or dad.
So,
Wild is all it is, right? Like there's just so many, you start thinking about these rabbit holes of what could be. Like it just, again, I want you to just to put yourself in this family. That's the goal of the conversation this morning, is just to put yourself in the family.
Also, that these are two people that have moved from an area totally different. Rebecca is not from that area,
Mm-hmm.
and neither is the husband.
Yeah.
They're both from a different area, so they're around people that are not their own.
Yeah, they're in a foreign land already. Yeah. Genesis 26, really interesting little side story here about Isaac. They're traveling, and they get to a place, and he says, hey, Rebecca, you're good looking. We're going to tell them you're my sister, because if we tell them that you're my wife, they'll kill me and they'll take you. It's like, oh, where did he learn that from? So that happens in Genesis 26. Later in Genesis 26, we see Esau take 2 wives from a group of people called the Hittites. The Hittites were on the list of do not marry them. And Esau's like, whatevs. I'm going to marry 2 of them. Not only just one, I'm going to marry 2 of them. And if you get to the very end of Genesis 26, verse 35, it says they, meaning Esau's 2 wives, were a grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah. So we've got Isaac and Rebekah, twin boys fighting each other, favoritism. The older boy goes and marries 2 girls, and Isaac and Rebekah cannot stand their daughters-in-law. It just keeps getting better. It just keeps getting better. So then you get to Genesis 27. Isaac's about to die, so he says, Esau, come, I want to give you your blessing. I want to give you your inheritance as my firstborn. Well, clearly this whole bowl of soup situation never made it to Isaac, because he's still ready to give Esau everything and to give Esau the blessing. So he says, Esau, I want you to go hunting. I want you to go kill something good. Make me something good that you like to make. Cook it up. Bring it back to me. I'm going to eat it. It's kind of like my last meal, and then I'm going to give you your blessing. This is the plan. So Esau's like, Dad, I'm on it. And he starts going out, and he goes and starts hunting. Well, Rebekah hears this conversation. And Rebekah's like, Jacob's my favorite. He's going to get the blessing. And so she puts together this whole plan. She cooks a bowl of stew. And she puts animal skin on the back of Jacob's neck and on his arms, and dresses him up, puts on Esau's clothed so he smells like the wilderness, and then has Jacob go in and say, hey, Dad, here's the bowl of stew you've asked for. I'm ready to receive my blessing. And Isaac, he's old, he can't see. He's like, that's Jacob's voice, but like, you feel hairy like Esau, and you smell like the outside. So, okay, I guess you're Esau. Gives him the blessing. This goes down.
But Rebecca also knows that what she was told when she was pregnant.
She does.
So she's kind of like, okay, well, God told me this, so I'm going to make it happen.
This whole thing of like, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. She was helping God because he needed it. Thank you, Vicki. Isaac asks these questions. He's like, how'd you get back so soon? And Jacob's like, oh, well, the Lord blessed my hunt. And so I was able to do this so quickly. Like there were just all these cover-ups. So the blessing happens. Isaac gives the blessing to Jacob. Esau then returns. He's like, hey, Dad, I got your bowl of stew. I just went out and killed something, cooked this up for you. And Isaac's like, what are you talking about? I already gave you the blessing. So now this goes crazy, and Esau says, I'm going to kill my brother. I'm just going to straight up murder him. I'm going to wait till my dad dies because I don't want to cause grief to him. But as soon as Dad dies, I am going to kill you, Jacob. This is the plan. The drama just keeps getting better and better and better. We get somewhere later in Genesis 27, and Rebekah's like, no, I can't have my least favorite son kill my favorite son. So let me tell another lie, and I'll go to Isaac and say, hey, Isaac, I want to get a wife for Jacob, but I don't want him to get a wife from the Hittite women like your favorite son did. I want my favorite son to go back to our homeland and get a relative for our wife. So can we send him away? This was just a plot for her to get Jacob away so Esau wouldn't kill him. But Isaac says, yeah, that's a good idea. Go on back, send him back, and go get a wife. Esau sees all this in the later part of Genesis 27, and he says, well, I'll marry a third Hittite woman. And so now he's got 3 wives, 3 daughters-in-law to Isaac and Rebekah that they can't stand. Jacob is now going off to get a wife from his homeland. So again, put yourself here in Jacob's shoes for a minute. He's the younger twin. God tells his mother, one day you're going to rule over your older brother. He's his mother's favorite son. His father loves his older brother more. He tricks his brother out of his birthright and his inheritance. Now his brother wants to kill him. And so he's fleeing his brother's wrath under the cover of a lie from his mother to find a wife that his parents won't hate like his 3 sisters-in-law. That's Isaac. This is just wild. So finally we get to Jacob. This is Joseph's father. We just read about him in Genesis 37 when it said Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his other children. Let's talk about Jacob. Genesis 29. Yo. That's a great question. I kind of wonder, like, legally binding, great term. How official was this bowl of soup? That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of parts in the story, we didn't go into them, that happened with Abraham and again with Isaac when they were like sending kids off to get wives. There was a thing where both of them said to their servant, put your hand under my thigh and swear to me that you won't take a wife from the foreigners that we live with, but that you'll get a wife for my kid from my hometown. So there was some kind of binding oath, as you're saying there. Yeah. And like you said, clearly Isaac never heard of this, or maybe Isaac heard of it and was like, it didn't count? Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So Jacob, 29, Genesis 29, remember, Rebekah is sending him off, goes back to her homeland. Jacob meets this guy named Laban. Laban is his uncle. So he meets Laban. Laban has 2 daughters. The older one is Leah, and the younger one is Rachel. She's the hot one. So these are Jacob's cousins. This was how it went back then. Jacob sees Rachel, to quote Stacy, the hot one. And he falls in love with her immediately, head over heels. He's like, that's my girl. That's the one. And so he says, like, Laban, I want to marry her. What do I need to do? And Laban's like, serve me for 7 years. 7 years, work for me, and then I'll give you Rachel as your wife. So Jacob does it. And the Bible even says the 7 years were like a day because he was so in love with this girl that like the time just flew by. So it comes to the marriage night. It's dark. They're intense. They live in the middle of nowhere. There's not like lights going on here. And
Probably got a lot of wine at the wedding.
probably had a little something. So Laban sneaks Leah into the tent. So you can imagine Jacob's surprise when he wakes up in the morning and the sun rises. And he goes, you are not Rachel. Laban, what have you done? And Laban's like, oh, well, we can't give away the younger daughter until the older daughter is married. So you got to marry her first. But if you serve me for another 7 years, I'll give you Rachel too. And so they make that agreement. And Jacob ends up serving Laban for 14 years. And he now has 2 wives. So this whole polygamy thing, they still ain't got this figured out. They still don't figure out what's happening here. Because in Genesis 29, someone read verse 30.
Jacob lay with Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he worked for the man another 7 years.
So we've talked a lot about favoritism with children, and now we've got favoritism with wives. I've got these 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, but I like
And so the
Rachel better.
rivalry between the
Oh, the rivalry between Leah and Rachel is intense, and it escalates. It escalates pretty crazy because Leah had children. Rachel had none. And so that tore Rachel up. So once again, here we are with like the family of promise, right? God said, I will make you great. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here, this is the lineage we're talking about. And here's Jacob with his favorite wife. No kids. All these kids with Leah, but no kids yet with his favorite wife.
And God repeated that promise that he gave to Abraham, to Jacob, out in the
Yep.
desert where he was traveling, because he had a dream from us, and I'm going to make your descendants.
Yep. God repeated the promise to Isaac and Jacob, to both of them.
It wasn't like Jacob did not know
Yes.
what was coming. He knew, but once again, we have a trust factor.
Yes. A lack of trust and a God needs my help. I'm going to take matters into my own hands situation. Gina.
What does this look like? Does Jacob go through the wedding ceremony with Rachel that consummates it with Leah
Correct.
and then is able to consummate with Rachel and then work the other 7 years?
Yes. If you read through the details, he marries Leah, he has the ceremony with Rachel, consummates with Leah, wakes up in the morning, finds out what happens, and then Laban says, okay, I'll give you Rachel too, but you have to give Leah her week of cleansing. So that happens, and then like that next week, Jacob and Rachel marry, but then he serves the other 7 years.
So not to run down a rabbit hole, but that really does go to show that consummation is the marriage. That is the union. Not the ceremony. Not
Yes.
the civil, not all the peripheral stuff, but
Yeah, I mean, think even when God says a man will leave his father and mother and the 2 will become one flesh. That's the thing.
that's, okay.
Yeah.
That's the heart of it.
Exactly.
But maybe it should be something said for Jacob's, I guess, gives him a little credit that he got what he wanted. He got Rachel and he still stayed for 7 years.
Yeah.
When he's doing like, well, I got what I wanted, he's out, just like he did his work, right?
Sorry, the page scrolled and I lost my notes. Yeah, agree. He stuck it out 14 years for this girl, for Rachel. So Leah has children, Rachel doesn't. And so Rachel's like, hey, Jacob, go lay with my maidservant and give me some children through her. So that happens. And then Leah's like, well, I can do that. Hey, Jacob, go lay with my maidservant and have some kids. So like this thing just keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So at this point in the story, we get to somewhere around Genesis 30, end of 29, beginning of 30. Jacob has 4 wives, Leah, Rachel, and then each of their maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah. Wow. So he's got 4 wives. He has 10 sons. We don't know how many daughters. They only counted sons in the Old Testament. So he's got 4 wives, 10 sons, and no children from his favorite wife.
Well, 30 verse 21
We're not there yet.
says, sometime later she gave birth to a daughter.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Dinah. We get this story of this girl named Dinah, who ends up, as another part of the side story, she ends up being raped, and so then her older brothers go and completely massacre the entire town where that family came from. Again, the drama here is just...
Who needs soap operas?
Finally, Rachel, the favorite wife, gives birth to Joseph in Genesis 30, verses 22 through 24. This is where Joseph is born. Finally get there. Genesis 30, 22 through 24. Joseph is born. Think of it this way. Joseph was Jacob's 11th son, but he was the firstborn from his favorite wife. And we know, we've talked about the importance of the firstborn here. This is the firstborn of his favorite wife. This is the firstborn. To Jacob, in his mind at least, this is the firstborn that matters. This is the, I loved him more than all my other children, because he was the firstborn of my favorite wife. You see how this all kind of built up now? Jacob ends up leaving Laban, so served him for 14 years. Jacob made Laban very wealthy because God blessed the work of Jacob. And so Jacob's like, okay, now that I have a son from my favorite wife, I need to now go out and kind of be my own man, be on my own, get away from Laban. So he ends up leaving Laban. That's a whole other story about how Laban chased after him and tried to bring him back, and he said, all the women and children are mine, and all this stuff. So that's a whole other side of drama with the uncle. This is also where, it's crazy. This is also where Jacob wrestles with God, and God changes his name from Jacob to Israel. That happens in this part of the story. Jacob decides, I need to go back and reunite with my brother Esau. It's been 14 years since Jacob and Esau have seen each other. Remember the last time we saw Esau wanted to kill Jacob because of the whole birthright thing. And so Jacob's like, I got to go back. Leaves Laban, starts heading back toward his homeland. You get this in Genesis 33. He's got this giant caravan because Jacob has also become very, very wealthy at this point in the story. He has this big caravan, but he's so worried as he's approaching Esau that Esau is still ticked off and wants to kill him. So what he does is he sends all these livestock, all these animals as a gift to try to appease his brother. He then puts his 2 least favorite wives, the Zilhah and Bilhah, whatever. Yeah, he puts his least favorite wives and children in the front, so that way if anyone gets killed, well, at least it's my least favorite. After that is Leah and her children, and then guess who's in the way back? Rachel, Joseph as well. My favorite wife, my favorite child. They're going to be the caboose because I got to protect them. I don't care if everyone else dies. I got to protect my favorite wife and my favorite son here. It just continues to build. The reunion of the brothers actually goes really well. Jacob ends up settling somewhere nearby. Rachel gives birth one more time to a son named Benjamin. and she dies while giving birth to Benjamin. Genesis 35, you get a list of all of Jacob's sons. This list is repeated in Exodus chapter 1 because it says these were the tribes who were in slavery in Egypt. So you read about Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Issachar, like all of those names, those 12 tribes of Israel. Remember, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. These are the 12 sons we're talking about. Joseph is one of those. He's the second youngest. Benjamin is the youngest, but Joseph, again, favorite, firstborn of his favorite wife. Is the drama like settling and coming together here? We get to Genesis 37, and that's where we meet Joseph as a 17-year-old boy. Joseph's family history has a lot to be desired. There's impatience, right? I need to take things into my own hand. God needs my help, as Vicky wonderfully said. There's incredible favoritism. There is a strong family history of lying to protect themselves. There's fraud. There's jealousy. Shrewdness. Now I'm calling it fraud, Stacy. There's jealousy. We've got death threats. There's polygamy. We've got mothers dying while their kids are still young. This is a messed up family. And yet, this is the family of promise. I will make you a great nation. Promise made to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. That promise was made by God to all three. Dysfunctional families often produce dysfunctional families. And we see that truth in these 3 generations here. Isn't this wild? So, what do we learn from this, though? Why cover this drama? Do what?
That a man should only have one.
It's a great start. Let's start with the flaw thing. I think this is the first point I want to make. I actually like that God, or the Bible, doesn't hide the flaws of the people God has chosen to do his work and his will. Again, the family of promise here, and look at how messed up they are.
If this was written by man alone and not under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, don't you think that would have been left over?
They would have left out some of these details, yeah. It would have just been how great of a man of faith Abraham was, and it would have just been the Isaac on the mountaintop sacrifice story, and that would have been it. All the other stuff would have been left out.
It's also amazing that, if you really get the studies of families, it is so extremely detailed for all these kids.
Yeah.
The kids they had, the grandkids we had, the great-grand Esau too. And his file, it's just way detailed, and I don't know why, but it is
Yeah.
extremely detailed.
We did the flyby. Yeah, there's so much more detail in here. But I love this because I look at these stories and go, man, I'm just as messed up as these people are. That means God can still use me in some way. That's encouraging. That's very encouraging that the Bible does not hide the flaws of these people. I think number 2, people often talk about live and learn. That's a popular expression, right? You live and you learn. You make mistakes, you learn from them, you move on. Well, how about learn and live? What if we look at the mistakes that people in the Bible made as examples to go, all right, that didn't go so great. I shouldn't do that. There's wonderful lessons that we can learn from these verses. It's yes, the Bible is God's story of his grace and his perfection, but it's also the story of man's imperfection. And there's so much that we can pull from that. And then number 3, God can use us regardless of our family history or our background. Again, these people were Jerry Springer. If there ever was a Jerry Springer episode, this is the one.
He uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise.
Exactly. This is 3 generations of chaos. And yet, God still says, I will make you great. I will bless the whole world through your lineage. Of course, he's talking about Christ, because Christ comes through this family line. That's the blessing that we receive. But look at the imperfection that it all came from. Nobody in this room has a perfect family. Let's be honest. But we get to the story of Joseph. We're introduced to him as a 17-year-old boy. He's growing up in a rough situation. And we're going to find out his situation gets a lot more rough as we go. But then we also get to the end of the story, and we see Joseph achieve absolutely incredible things for God and for his plan and his work, regardless of what his past was, regardless of what his family's past or his family's background was. He overcame. He's the ultimate example of turning lemons into lemonade. And I love this story so much, but I couldn't start with let's go talk about all the great things that Joseph did without starting in this, look at what he came from. Because then the great things that he was able to achieve through God's help are so much greater. And you look at it and go, it was only God who could do those things through Joseph. So that's why I wanted to spend so much time in that backstory. So next week, come back, we'll pick up in 37. We'll get a little bit more of a glimpse of Joseph's immaturity and his lack of judgment, because he starts having these prophetic dreams, and he decides he's going to tell his brothers, who already hate him, about these great dreams he's having. So the drama continues next week. Any other thoughts or comments? That was a quick drive through of the book of Genesis, but super interesting stuff.
I think it was mentioned multiple times, but this family, they tried to make things happen as God said would happen. He didn't try it.
We're going to get there. Yeah, Joseph decides this whole I'm going to take matters into my own hands. He's like, that's going to stop. I'm going to trust. Yeah. He waits. Oh, such a big, big difference. A big turn of events in this family for sure. Anything else? Cool. Somebody close us out, please. I'm excited to hear Ajay speak. Looking forward to that. Amen. Thanks, Ike.